Good evening, everyone. It's Holly Thier, Mayor, and I'm going to wait a few minutes for the rest of our colleagues to arrive, and we will start the meeting shortly. Thank you. Okay, everyone. It looks like we have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and start our meeting. It's the meeting of the Tiburon Town Council for April 2nd. Lee, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Fredericks.
Present.
Councilmember Nick Farr.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Wellner.
Here.
And Mayor Thier.
I am here. Okay, so first I would like to take any public comment on matters that are not on our agenda tonight. Lee, could you look in the room and see if there's anyone who would like to speak?
Seeing no one in the room, but we do have somebody online.
Great.
So I will recognize Chuck.
Thank you, Town Council. Chuck Hornberg here, Chairperson of the Parks, Open Space and Trails Commission. Given that there was not or a request by Town Council to have Post present some material at this meeting, I wanted to make sure that you all were informed. I think many of you were, but it's not clear to me. But I want to make sure the public was informed as well that that group, both Commissioner Moon and Commissioner Judge, will be presenting that material on May 21st to you all, at least tentatively. That's what's scheduled for the agenda. In the meantime, they'll be working with lots of community members and getting more information. And then the other piece I wanted to inform you on is that we have also launched the survey for the mini parks. We have that was launched last Friday, and as of earlier this afternoon, there was about 70 responses so far, which is great. And that Mike Gafferty, the new commissioner, has been taking over 2 other of the subcommittees and has been busy meeting with people since I transferred the different subcommittees I was on to him, as well as Commissioner Burr. And finally, just a good kind of piece and kudos to the town staff is that there is now on the town website updated information about what's going on in terms of our outreach and desires in terms of updating the parks plan and implementing things. So that way the public is better informed on pieces that we're working on as a post commission, and hopefully you all as town council members will be well informed on those items as well. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you all.
Okay, thank you so much, Chuck, and thank you for your work and the work of Post. We're very excited to see that progress. Okay, we are now moving on to the consent calendar. Is there any member of the town council that would like to pull an item from consent? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
Seeing none.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move. I'll second.
Great. Lee, could you take the vote?
Councilmember Fredericks.
Yes.
Councilmember Nick Farr.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wellner.
Yes.
Mayor Thier.
Yes. Okay, so 2 items on our agenda will be continued. Staff has requested that public hearing number 1 be continued as well. Action item 1 will also be continued. So I am going to take public hearing 2, since we do have speakers present tonight. And that is the municipal code amendments. And if we could have a brief staff report, and then I'm going to call on Talia Smith, who will be followed by Dr. Jonathan Ma.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public, welcome, and members of the council. Tonight, council's considering the first reading of an amendment to an ordinance related to e-bikes in town. The town has long supported the use of electric bikes, motorized scooters, and other electric devices, collectively called electric mobility devices, as alternative modes of transportation, but also recognizes that this increased usage of these devices has created safety concerns regarding operator interactions with other folks, including pedestrians and other bike riders, et cetera. To that end, the council last year in March passed an ordinance, which was the first ordinance we had related to electric mobility devices. Subsequent to the passage of that ordinance, a state law was passed, AB 1778, which gave Marin County the ability to launch a pilot program related to electric bikes and some more restrictions on them. The County of Marin's supervisors passed the first reading of their ordinance related to AB 1778, I believe on the 25th, and are asking all towns and cities to consider integrating the new elements of that ordinance into our ordinances. To that end, we have 2 folks who are going to speak on behalf, or to talk a little bit about the background of this and why the county is so passionate about this. First, I believe we're going to have Talia Smith, who's the Director of Legislative and Governmental Affairs with the County of Marin, and she will be followed by Dr. John Ma, who is with the American College of Surgeons, as well as the San Francisco Medical Society. So with that, Talia, welcome.
Good evening, Council. It's a treat to get to drive my own slides. I don't get to do this with the Board of Supervisors. My name is Talia Smith, the Director of Legislative Intergovernmental Affairs with the County of Marin. And I have a short presentation for you today. What I'm going to summarize, of course, is the ordinance that is before your consideration, but I also really importantly want to just summarize youth e-bike safety generally in Marin County and what we have been looking at with our public health department and what we are looking at launching as a county-wide initiative to really improve what we have seen as a very serious safety concern with young people on e-bikes in Marin. So background, just quickly how we got here. So we've already highlighted county-wide, long supported active transportation. What we have seen in the last few years is a surge in popularity of e-bikes among school-age youth. And we actually first started seeing alarming trends when we looked at just first responder bicycle crash data. We actually, before 2023, we did not separate e-bikes from bikes. So all we could tell you was that young people, the accident rate for 911 accidents. So again, these are serious bike accidents. This is not like you fell down on your bike and you didn't need to call the EMS. But the 911 accident rate for all youth went up 110%. So in 2023, we actually started tracking that by e-bikes and conventional bikes. And what we saw was that the 10 to 15-year-old age group has a slightly higher but relatively same accident rate compared to other groups. When talking about conventional bikes, it's about 1.5 times higher. But when talking about e-bikes, it's 5 times as high. I also want to note, and I'm not going to touch on it because Dr. Ma is going to present on it afterwards, but our emergency rooms, particularly concerning, are seeing that the injuries related to these e-bikes are much more akin to motor vehicle injuries as opposed to conventional bicycle injuries, which are not as serious. So next slide, please. Oh, I get to drive them. Next slide. This is just a graphic representation of what I previously was describing. So this is actually on our public health bicycle safety dashboard. It's updated weekly from our public health. team, and they receive this information from first responders countywide. So this does track bicycle crashes that occur anywhere in Marin County. And what you see on the right is a much steeper line when you compare the e-bike accidents with the 10 to 15-year-old age group. Quickly, because I'm going to say the class of e-bikes several times the next few slides. Class 1, pedal assist only. There's no throttle on a Class 1 e-bike. Class 2, that has a throttle. So you do not need to pedal in order to operate it. Class 3 has a pedal assist only, and legal Class 3 bikes in California law do not have a throttle. But I want to note that Class 3 bikes are already in state law limited to riders over 16. You don't need a license, but already in state law, you have to be over 16 to ride a Class 3 bikes. That's because it goes up to 28 miles an hour.
Sorry, what was the max speed on Class 1s? It was blocked by the,
The max speed on Class 1s
Okay.
and 2s
There you
is
go.
both 20 miles an hour.
thank you.
All right, so I just want to back up by saying we've been seeing these alarming trends, and both our public health officer, Dr. Matt Willis, as well as some advocates here is in the emergency room space in Marin County have taken a real advocacy forward approach. We have been meeting with federal officials, although there are certainly, that is a hard time to get additional federal regulations passed on these devices. We had state advocacy. We're going to talk about this specific bill. The civil grand jury did a report last year specifically on the safety risks to those under 16. And I want to note that we did convene a countywide special committee on youth e-bike safety. It was actually one of the recommendations of the grand jury report. And we do have council members, none from Tiburon, but we do have 3 council members on it representing different cities and towns and law enforcement and schools and even bike shop owners on it. We also are planning for a public education campaign. I'm going to touch on that in a few slides. And then finally, we did present an informational update to the Transportation Authority of Marin board in January. And that board is all 5 supervisors and a representative from every city and town in Marin. I'm going to not go through everything on this slide, but I just want to highlight that this is a growing concern in California, not just for Marin County, but there are other communities up and down the coast, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, that are seeing these concerns around young people on e-bikes and the injury rate. And actually, AB 1778, which we're discussing today, San Diego had its own version of that bill. And to our knowledge, we are far ahead of San Diego and actually implementing what the bill allows us to implement. San Diego has some more work to do to get there. So why are we here today? What is Assembly Bill 1778? So it is actually the state vehicle code that determines age limits for bicycles, of course, motorcycles, vehicles, driver's license, et cetera. So without a state bill that amends that code, we could not be here today and we could not set an age limit on an e-bike. But because we actually had a bill last year specific to Marin through our Assembly member, Damon Connolly, that bill opened the door to allow jurisdictions in Marin County to actually set a 16 and up age limit for the Class 2 throttle e-bikes. Again, already exists for Class 3, but we're here today talking about putting in that new age limit for Class 2. It also does require all riders, that is riders 18 and up of Class 2 e-bikes, to wear helmets. So this graph really represents what does 1778 do. We are here today because we, in consideration of this law, which allows jurisdictions to pass this, it has been emphasized over and over and over again through our special committee, through our presentation to TAM, that if we're going to move forward, we want not a patchwork of laws in Marin County, but a really clear countywide message that in Marin County, countywide, not subject to jurisdictional boundaries, we would have this new rules in place that you'd have to be 16 and up to ride throttle e-bikes. Also, our public education campaign, which I am going to touch on in this next slide, is countywide, and that is the County of Marin and the Transportation Authority of Marin that have put dollars towards that. Target audience is teens and parents. This is not just about messaging 1778 or new rules, but really about safe riding. How do we reach kids and their parents and let them know how they can ride safer? And we're working on getting materials out before the end of the school year. Okay, so here's a timeline. Here we are today, April 2nd, before your council. We are looking at July 1, or we were saying generally July, may vary a little bit jurisdiction as the implementation date of these new ordinances. We went to our Board of Supervisors March 25th. We went first so that we could aid cities as they consider their ordinances. All right, and then this is just the ends of my, this is the end of my deck. I just wanted to bring us back to how we got here, what the aim of these ordinances is, and how we're going to measure success. And we identified the problem through a disproportionate injury and 911 accident rate for those on e-bikes in the 10 to 15-year-old age group. So we see a really important metric of success of this as to whether that 911 injury rate goes down for that age group. We have now really solid data, what existed before passing any new laws limiting those types of bikes to riders 16 and up. And so we will be able to see whether our efforts of the public education campaign, of these new rules, of the coordination with schools, of all of the efforts that we're doing is actually able to reduce that injury rate. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. John Ma.
When can we ask questions about,
Oh.
do we ask questions about both together afterwards?
Yeah,
know-
let's
Or do we
wait.
ask in between?
Let's wait for Dr. John Ma to do his presentation, and then we'll do questions at the end.
Thank you.
Thanks, Talia. Thank you to the Tiburon Town Council for moving this item forward today, and to Mayor Holly Thier for the invitation to share my perspective. I'm a governor of the American College of Surgeons, and I was 2018 president of the San Francisco Marin Medical Society, who both strongly support this legislation. I'd really like to thank Assemblyman Connolly and President Sackett for championing AB 1778 across Marin to protect both youth and adult e-bike riders. I'd like to highlight the important points shared by Talia Smith about the legislation, and also the importance of adopting the model ordinance countywide without amendments. What we've seen, the worldwide sales and use of e-bikes grew dramatically in the past decade, particularly amongst kids. Surgeons, pediatricians, and emergency medicine providers globally have witnessed a very serious pattern of e-bike related injury and death. What we've seen in the United States has really been two eras in e-bike injury. There was an early era with the majority of injuries in older patients who had the financial resources to purchase the earlier generation and more expensive e-bikes to exercise outdoors during the pandemic when gyms closed. In the second era, e-bike prices fell significantly, becoming much more affordable, leading to a dramatic increase in youth use and youth injury. Marin has long been recognized as the birthplace of the modern mountain biking industry. For decades, Marin Health Medical Center has been the primary hospital treating bicyclists injured across the county. And in 2023, we became very concerned about a spike in e-bike related deaths, including pedestrians who had been struck by e-bike riders. Dr. Edward Alfrey analyzed the Marin Health Trauma Registry database. He found that e-bike victims, compared to regular bicyclists, pedal cyclists, were nearly a decade older in age. They were more likely to require admission to the hospital. They had a higher risk of dying. Nearly 1 out of 8 e-bike riders brought as a full trauma activation died, representing a nearly 37-fold higher risk compared to pedal cyclists. The e-bike injury pattern includes pelvic fractures, which we see more frequently with motorcycle riders. Although all the deaths have been in adults, children crashing on e-bikes have also sustained very serious injuries that place them at significant risk for long-term morbidity. So I'd really like to thank Marin Healthcare District Board.
Dr. Mar, I think the clicker is backwards. It's not intuitive. It's the other way. Again, sorry.
I'd like to thank the District Board of Directors for being the first to call for a study of the problem back in the winter of 2022. It was Marin Health CEO, Dr. David Klein, and Dr. Alfrey, who are both surgeons, who had the vision to invite Marin Public Health Director Matt Willis to study the problem that we were seeing on the clinical front lines more closely, and that's what resulted in the dashboard. It's interesting. We spent the next 18 months to understand the problem further. And it's interesting, as you study this, it only becomes larger in scope the more that you look into it. E-bikes were really adopted early in Asia. They were met with limited enthusiasm. The next major adopter was Europe. There are numerous scientific articles that describe the novel e-bike dangers and the risk of very severe neurosurgical, orthopedic, and maxillofacial injuries. In Israel in 2017, a study of 549 e-bike patients noted that 65% suffered orthopedic injuries. They were more likely to die of fatal injuries after colliding with motor vehicles when they were used in traffic. Pediatric populations are particularly susceptible. One review noted that 35% of all e-bike related trauma occurs in patients under the age of 18. A 2018 Dutch Level 1 Trauma Center study noted that though e-bikes only accounted for about 3% of the accidents at their institution, they accounted for nearly a third of the fatalities nationally. Almost a third of cyclists in the Netherlands use electric bikes, where they also set the limit for e-bikes to 15 miles per hour and the minimum age of ownership to age 15. I'd really like to thank Ms. Amelia Stafford, a San Rafael High School student, who shared her story of being injured on a Class 2 e-bike publicly in the fall of 2023. She was the inspiration for this legislation and catalyzed action forward in Sacramento. I was grateful that Governor Newsom went to her home to sign the bill as the last bill he signed in 2024. Earlier in that year, U.S. researchers noted that there had been a dramatic 49-fold increase in e-bike riders with head injuries nationally over the past 5 years, which they attributed to a lack of safety regulations like the bill being considered today, requiring the use of mandatory helmets, speed limits, and age restrictions. There will still be much work to be done nationally, but passing this ordinance today is a major step forward. The legislation highlights the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission recommendation that children under age 12 should not operate any vehicle that travels more than 10 miles per hour, an intent that is supported by the American Academy of Neurological Surgeons and the American Academy of Pediatrics. I really want to thank you for your leadership and for your time, and I urge the Town Council to vote yes on this important public health and safety issue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ma. We also appreciate your time and Talia's time in and work on this important issue. I think there was some questions from Councilmember Nick Farr. Did you still have a question or was it answered?
Mayor, I think we both have questions.
Perfect.
Just wondering if Talia could tell us a little bit about the education program.
Perfect.
Great. I would love to, because while we're here today to consider new laws, we do not see this issue as at all going to be fixed just with new rules. So the special committee that we formed, recommendation of the grand jury report, has essentially two goals. One is consideration of these countywide laws, but the other is this public education campaign. So we actually contracted with a marketing firm that is local about a month and a half ago, and we are fully into the material development, and we're doing actually like city or Marin regional specific ads that are really bright, graphic. They're meant to capture teens' attention, and we're going to be doing an animation also that's going to be showed in all the schools that we can get it into that have TV screens that they show in the beginning of the school day. And we're hoping to get that out, like I said, at the end of the school year, and then also part of the summer packets, and as well as in the fall with the back to school as well. We're going to have another push to get that information out.
What about social media where a lot of the kids this age hang out?
Absolutely. And actually, we have brought in a project manager for this who used to work at TikTok. So she is working with our marketing team on that strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Nick Farr, did you have some questions?
Yes, I have 3 questions. So the first one is on the data for bicycle accidents versus e-bikes. Can we go back to that slide? We kind of went through it
Yes.
quick. Wanted to make sure I understood. There we go. Okay, so this is the blue is a accident rate per 100,000, and it looks like conventional bike accidents are similar to e-bike accidents in terms of their rate for age. Is that 10 to 15 on both of them?
Yes. Although, and actually Dr. Ma may help me answer this, but there are much more conventional bicycles in Marin than e-bikes. And so it's not quite a number to number if you're looking at the 181 to 187.
But that's a rate per 100,000. The blue one is the number of total accidents, right? So
Yeah.
if there are that part's a little bit confusing, because if there are many more conventional bikes, but the accident rate is similar and the total number of accidents is also similar, that's a little bit confusing to me, because it looks like e-bikes and conventional bikes are both quite dangerous in terms of number of accidents for 10 to 15-year-olds. Am I misreading
Yeah,
something?
no, I'm probably gonna have to follow up with our public health team to answer that correctly, but
Okay.
I do know, for instance, like looking at the number of accidents, we do have the same number of accidents for e-bike and conventional bikes, but we have many more 10 to 15-year-olds on conventional bikes, meaning that the e-bikes represented a very disproportional share of that
Right, where I
accident
would
rate.
think the rate, the dark blue
Yeah.
would be much lower if there are many more conventional bicycles, then the rate per 100,000 would probably be much lower than the rate for e-bikes, of
Mhm.
which there are far fewer. The second question that I had was, it looks like e-bikes are significantly safer for people over the age of 15.
It could be, it also could be a reflection of their usage. Do you want to answer?
Just to answer your question, you're correct. This is a rate per 100,000. And it's quite striking the difference in the older age groups compared to the younger age groups
And,
in this
uh,
study.
I would imagine it wasn't part of the study initially, but is it possible that cycling may be a very dangerous sport? Is that kind of what we're seeing from this, and that maybe the e-bikes are maybe kind of cruising and not going quite as fast?
You're absolutely right. I've been at the hospital for a decade, and I've witnessed deaths from motorcycles, from traditional pedal bicycles, and from e-bikes. But what has been most striking to me is the number of deaths, which this particular dashboard didn't address. But what we noted was a dramatically higher death rate, and that's not captured on this specific slide. But
Right.
yes,
And then the second question is about enforcement at the county level. So how is that going to be handled? Because I think for the town of Tiburon, some of the things that we've looked to enforce, like speed limits and other things like that are on our path, it's been quite challenging for us to come up with a plan for enforcement of something like that. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to see how they're handling it at the county level.
Absolutely. And I will just say that this is passing the law brings multiple benefits in itself. One is that really clear messaging to middle schoolers and their parents around what type of bike they should be buying. However, we know that enforcing this new law on its own is going to be very rare to pull over a young person suspecting their age and suspecting the type of bike they're on, because in discussions with police agencies, it's just against their department policy to pull over somebody based on a suspected age. So we know that like 90-something% of these cases where somebody actually is cited, it's because they're already going to have an interaction with a law enforcement officer. Maybe they ran a stop sign, maybe they're speeding, maybe they're riding the wrong way on the road. And that officer's already having that interaction. And if they're on a class 2 e-bike and they're under 16, that's going to be added as a secondary infraction.
Okay. Is there any funding for enforcement that comes along with this that might, take some of the burden off of the cities or towns for a program like this?
Right. And as we noted, we don't see this resulting in additional stops because of this primary secondary piece. So there is no additional funding associated with it. It would essentially be similar to, for instance, when 1778 was first introduced, it was actually a statewide law. I kind of left that out of my presentation, but when 1778 was first introduced, it was a statewide change in the vehicle code to simply apply the same age restriction on Class 2 bikes as Class 3, already in law. And if that was passed at the state level, there would be no additional funding to law enforcement officers or agencies to enforce that. So we ended up with a Marin-only pilot just because the California legislature wasn't ready to regulate Class 2 e-bikes, but that is a long answer to your question.
And then my last question, in terms of signaling or enforcement, it kind of may help with both. Have you considered a colorful registration sticker for e-bikes of all classes, and maybe a color per class, so that enforcement and others could understand whether or not something was registered with the town or with the county or with the state, and whether it was compliant?
I will start by saying I actually really like that idea, because what we are doing right now is training the police officers on this. Legally, all e-bikes are supposed to have a very clear marked sticker under California law that says Class 1, 2, or 3. As you all can imagine, there are probably plenty of e-bikes that don't have that legally required sticker, but that is actually a really good point that I'm actually going to bring back to our public education folks, or the public education campaign folks, because at a minimum, it should be a part of that to remind people that their bike needs to have that clear sticker.
Right. And if you had, let's say, yellow for, a bike in a certain age of the rider, and it was registered with a town or with the county, you could also have a barcode that might also help with theft tracking and that sort of thing.
No, that's actually a great idea, because also the schools have had kids start to register their e-bikes. And so we should actually, we'll talk with our partners at the Office of Education, because that could be something that they implement uniformly around Marin County schools, because they are having kids register e-bikes.
Right. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we
Can I
have
ask one
any
quick
more
question, Mayor?
questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. So I know this is about Marin County, but since you brought up San Diego, do you know, were they informed by different data set, or like how did they come up with a different criteria for their regulation? Did they just?
So we're actually, I was gonna say, if you wanted to add, we're pretty proud in Marin that we actually are one of the first areas in the country to start tracking this data, this e-bike versus conventional e-bike. And actually, Supervisor Mary Sackett and I, about a year ago, met with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. We met with 3 of the commissioners in Washington, D.C., and they were not aware even of any jurisdiction tracking this level of data. That being said, it probably will not surprise you that anecdotally, many of these jurisdictions have observed what they see as a real safety problem with young people on these throttle e-bikes. And that is my understanding of what has happened in San Diego. There's been a lot of calls from local folks down there to apply age restrictions. And I want to just add that their quote unquote twin bill in the legislature, Assembly Bill 1778, which allows jurisdictions in San Diego to pass laws, is actually not the same as ours. It actually simply would just not allow anyone under 12 to ride any e-bike. But that is their version of it. They don't have a 16 up for throttle, Class 2, et cetera.
Thank you.
Just to add, I want to acknowledge the surgeons up and down the state of California and all across the country. The hotspots have really been Irvine, New York City, Santa Barbara, and San Diego. And so we have witnessed, due to differing use and laws, a different pattern of injury. And so in San Diego, they really saw a greater trend towards injury in kids. And that's why they took this really strong action. Santa Barbara recently has gone with a very strict enforcement, no use of e-bikes in the Central Promenade, and stopping anyone who's traveling well above the speed limit. So there's action being taken all across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions from the council? Okay, thank you so much. I am now going to see if there's any public comment, either in the room or online. Lee?
Are you there? Yeah. Good evening. My name is Bob Middlestead. I'm with the nonprofit E-Bike Access. I've been here before talking about related issues. We support this ordinance 100%. It's very important. It's a great breakthrough, and the county has already adopted it for unincorporated areas. We need all the municipalities to do so, and you have the honor and the privilege of being the first, I hope, and to lead the way. This will send a message to parents that they shouldn't let their kids under 16 ride throttle e-bikes. It'll give parents an added argument with their kids when their kids say, you know, this gets, I'm sorry, it's against the law now. And it'll give the schools, the middle schools, a basis to say, sorry, leave them at home, don't ride them. And when appropriate, it'll give the Chief Jean and her force another enforcement tool. So it's very important, and we support it completely. If I can just take a minute or half a minute and respond to the data question. It is accident rate by 100,000 people, not by bikes. And so when you see about the same number of accidents for kids for both kind of bikes, as Talia said, there's so many more conventional bikes that those kids ride, that's what accounts for that. To me, the most important two things are the differential. You know, for e-bikes, the kids have 5 times the accident rate of any other age group, even though on the left-hand side, the accident rate for conventional bikes is roughly the same across all age groups. So that tells us something. And I know from counting bikes at the schools for Safe Routes to School that the electric bikes that the kids are riding in middle school tend to be the class 2, the throttle ones. And so they've got higher accident rates. They ride more of these throttle bikes. Put one and one together, and you've got the problem. And the other thing is, as Dr. Ma says, even if the accidents were the same or the same rate, they're much more severe on electric bikes because they go so much faster. So for all those reasons, we support this bill and hope you will endorse it quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob Middlestead. Do we have any other speakers in the audience?
My name is Bart Gershbein. I'm a retired physician practicing in the county for about 35 years. I was a kidney surgeon. My era, there was skateboards, but what is now just a terrible e-bike problem right on the bike path. The question is, are there any restrictions of using e-bikes? Do they have the same rules, e-bikes for regular bikes? They stop at red lights? Are they registered? Are the bikers insured? So if they hit an old guy like me and I go to the hospital, I can turn around and get covered by his insurance. I don't walk on the bike path anymore for that very reason, that they scoot by and they're behind me and they scoot at unreasonable speeds. And I would guess that I would say 20% of the people my age are on blood thinners. And it doesn't take much to get your head clopped. There was a poor guy in Sausalito who was killed by a conventional biker about 4 years ago, right off of Bridgeway. So those are the questions I have. Are there any restrictions on these people riding e-bikes on bike paths? Conventional bikes are no better at the right speed. I mean, there's a certain arrogance with the rider in Marin County. I used to see him in Kenfield Rehab, kind of too late. Anyway, do you have an answer for me, Mr. Nick? For you were talking about e-bikes in general, what are the restrictions on where they can use it? Are there any restrictions? Can they go on the bike path and travel 20, 30 miles an hour anytime they want? I mean, is that fair to regular people who walk or just taking a walk?
I'll just jump in and say we can't typically answer questions or engage in dialogue with comment,
I give
but
you my
it is something that's being looked at as part of the park plan in terms of our.
Speed bumps are a good way too. There's a sign, speed bump.
Thank you so much.
I
And
would
thank-
adopt this
Thank
question
you.
and ask the staff if they could answer.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wellner.
We let them know what
I'm,
restrictions on the bike
we
path.
we can
I
ask
can-
the staff to connect with him offline.
I'm
How's
s-
that? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. I couldn't hear for a second. I believe we have someone else coming up. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Seidler. I'm from WTBTM. And I just also want to really encourage you to adopt the ordinance. I think it's a great piece of legislation. And what I'd urge you to do is think a couple things, kind of big perspective. And I think a couple of you brought up some really good questions about safety. But this isn't the first time this has happened, where we have bicycles and then something makes them faster. In fact, when bicycles kind of started coming around at the turn of the century, 1800s, 1900s, there's this thing called internal combustion engine. And they started putting them on bicycles. And those became motorcycles. And we all know that motorcycles are a much different animal than bicycles because they go a lot faster. And of course, speed, velocity, and causes a lot of issues. And so you have to separate the usages of those. And so one of them uses a bike path and one of them uses a road. And so I think what we're seeing is a second coming of that. So it's the electric bike and the electric bicycle, and there's power assist, which is where it came from, and they have the tops out in Europe. And then all of a sudden, of course, you get people really inventive and they put a throttle on it. And that, in fact, I think is where you have your finger on the issue. And so I think it's, the Supervisor Sackett's done a great job. I think you guys and staff are doing a really good job keeping your finger on top of it. So I encourage you to continue to do so. But to answer the question of safety, what I urge you to do is when you look at those charts, and you look at other countries, particularly in Europe, where they have higher usage rates, when you get to densities that start to appear in parts of Tiburon, like downtown Tiburon on the Tiburon bicycle path, then what happens to create safety is not somebody writing a ticket, but actual separation of modes. So that means bicycles and pedestrians are separated from cars. So you have really 3 different modes of transportation. When you usually get about 7 to 10%, you really want to get mode separation. And when you have that mode separation, you'd be really surprised at how safe bicycles really are and how safe they can be and how we can protect pedestrians too, the most vulnerable users, bicycles, pedestrians. So I urge you to consider that as you consider other issues that you face are the infrastructure issues to separate bicycles from cars and pedestrians from bicycles and cars. Thank you very much, and congratulations on the great legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do we have any more speakers in the chambers? I see someone walking up, please. Introduce
Good evening.
yourself.
My name is Elizabeth Fullerton, and I'm a resident of Tiburon. And I feel like I'm a responsible bike rider, and it has given me mobility because I have an impairment, and it gives me the freedom and it allows me to travel. But then I'll sometimes walk on the bicycle path or even ride on the bicycle path. And these younger kids with powered assist motorized e-bikes will come zooming by me. Some have crashed into me. I've seen where when the town closes and we have the music, I've seen people drink and then get on these e-bikes. I've seen kids not wearing helmets. And, I don't particularly enjoy hearing from all my ER friends, doc friends, telling me horror stories of what happened. And last summer in Utah, I wanted to ride my bike on a trail, but it's an e-bike, and they wouldn't let me unless I got my doctor's note. So I called my doctor, and he said, "I'd like to see you because I haven't seen you in a couple of months. So come in, and then we'll fill out the form." So in Utah, if you have a disability and you need your e-bike on a trail, they give you a sticker on your bike. So they have designated areas where you cannot use an e-bike. And if you need to use the e-bike in these designated areas for protections of pedestrians and runners and slower non-motorized bicycle riders, you have the sticker that differentiates yourself so you won't get a ticket. And there's like security cameras that protects these trails to give tickets. I also live part-time in Germany, in Berlin. And I think that some of the things they did really has protect the publics. Well, I don't have to go on about telling you how quick these e-bikes are, but the rules that they've imposed has proven serious impact. For instance, you have to have a little sticker, and this little sticker also guarantees that you actually have insurance. Because if you cause an accident and you hurt yourself or you hurt other people, it's going to cost someone money. So with this sticker, it validates to the police officer that says, hey, I'm responsible and I have insurance. And it also allows me to know that I've gone through the safety protocol by always wearing my helmet, always doing safety precautions, not using lithium batteries that are going to explode and cause fire. And I'm not going to go into that because that's a different matter. But I think children, even under a certain age, are not even allowed to ride these things. My son got on his father's electric scooter under his custody, under his timeshare, and he impaled himself on the handlebar and sliced his scrotum. And I was the last one to know, and I was furious in the emergency room. So that is enough to really get me here tonight. And I want to protect those who really need it, and those who don't, they tend to abuse it. So I support 1778.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments, Ms. Fullerton. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to speak? Lee, could you help me out? Because I can only see the front row. Is anyone walking up to the mic?
Seeing nobody else in the room, but we do have one member of the public online. So I will
Perfect.
recognize Warren.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor Tier, and members of the council. This is Warren Wells with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I just wanted to thank the council and staff, and as well as the staff at the county for their work on this. I think this has been, as it was mentioned, this bill has kind of gone through several different iterations, and at this point, I think our biggest concern or just interest in this is consistency across our counties, cities, and towns. As we all know, the jurisdictional boundaries in Marin can be complex. I don't know that everyone knows exactly where, Marin unincorporated county transitions to Tiburon, transitions to Belvedere. We want to make sure that if this law passes, that everyone gets on the same page, and all of our partner agencies can be brought into alignment. Obviously, this body is just responsible for the town of Tiburon, but we want to urge everyone kind of in their roles in trying to bring everyone together. I do want to, I have pointed this out before, one aspect that it wasn't touched on today is the requirement under this law that all riders wear helmets. We talked a lot about the youth prohibition on Class 2 e-bikes, but this also requires riders of all ages, even over 18, to wear helmets on Class 2. And as Marin County is a destination for riders from all over the Bay Area, they come from San Francisco. I want to make sure that our education efforts are reaching out to people who might not know that Marin has different regulations now, or certain jurisdictions in Marin has different regulations now than the rest of the state. And kind of lastly, I do want to thank everyone, especially our partners in public health, for focusing on traffic violence, on injuries on our roads and pathways as a threat to public safety. And as part of this effort, I hope that we can also kind of expand this effort into thinking about reaching zero roadway deaths by the year 2050, which was the goal set in the local road safety plan adopted by all of Marin's jurisdictions last year. And I guess just the last thing I'll touch on is that, this has come up a bit, that we have seen people on bikes that are going way too fast, above the 20 miles per hour. This is an issue in California, that there are some scofflaw manufacturers selling bikes that are branded as Class 2 that are capable of traveling much faster than that. And we are working with our statewide partners to try to make sure that that those manufacturers stop selling bikes that are out of compliance with the state law, particularly to our young people. So thank you again for your efforts on this, and we look forward to working hand in hand.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments and for MCBC's work. Do we have any more people that would like to speak that are online?
Seeing none.
Okay, then I'm going to take it back to the council for discussion, and I'm going to lead us off with the discussion on this. So I wanted to take an opportunity to thank Dr. Jonathan Ma. I want to thank Talia Smith, Assemblymember Damon Connolly, and Supervisor Mary Sackett. So tonight is not just an opportunity to vote on something. We've got a situation where we've got these riders, 10 to 15-year-olds, with a five times the accident rate than on conventional bikes. Marin 911 calls have gone up 110%. We've got 37% higher risk for youth on these bikes than on conventional bikes. And the result that we're seeing after accidents, it is internal bleeding, fractures, brain trauma, and we have seen that there is a huge increase. 1 out of 8 e-bike riders have died. So tonight, we actually have an opportunity to save lives. I believe AB 1778 and the work that is being done in the county to bring all of our different partners together and have a consistent law and regulation across all of the different cities and towns in Marin will save lives. The fact that this legislation has a mandatory helmet provision is music to my ears. When I see kids without helmets, I ask them, where's your helmet? And I think that having this as mandatory for all riders, not just youth, is a very important thing to help save lives. So I am going to very strongly support this. I know that the Board of Supervisors voted unanimously, and I think there was one person that couldn't vote on it, but it was a unanimous vote. And I just want to say that I'm very proud of our county. I'm proud of the work that's being done, and I strongly support this. And I would like to move that we read by title only and carry the motion, then read the title of the draft ordinance and hold a roll call vote to pass first reading, waiving additional readings. And then if it's passed for the first reading, the ordinance will be scheduled for adoption at the next meeting.
Point of order before there's a second. I do have a question of staff.
Yeah,
Well-
we will have discussion
We
after
can
the,
have discussion after a
yeah,
second.
after it's seconded, we can have discussion.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. And Alice, would you like to ask your question to staff?
Yeah, I thought perhaps an appropriate kickoff on education about bike use in general, which also applies to e-bikes. Perhaps staff could give us an overview of what appropriate bike use on, let's just say, the O-Rail Trail, because I am sure there are people who have no idea.
The appropriate use right now, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we always look to,
It will also apply to e-bikes.
correct. I mean, we always first look to what the municipal code from an enforcement perspective, so we at least understand what the law is of what people are allowed to do and not to do. Beyond that, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking.
What does the law say they are allowed to do and not allowed to do
Sure.
when they're riding bikes on let's say the O-Rail Trail? I think, David,
I I
So
think,
for the old rail trail, class 1 and class 2 e-bikes are allowed. Speed limit, they must follow the speed limit, no more than 15 miles per hour on the trail, 8 miles per hour when pedestrians are present, which is pretty much the whole time. Class 3 bikes are not allowed on the old rail trail. Electric mobility devices, meaning electric scooters, the one wheels, and electric mobility assisted wheelchairs are allowed on the old rail trail. Again, they must follow the speed limit of no more than 15 miles per hour and 8 miles when pedestrians are present walking on there.
Thank you very much.
And one more thing, we do have in our municipal code that for the class 3 bikes, 16 and older only can ride it, and they must wear a helmet. So that is in our municipal code right now.
It is, I thought statewide, what is the requirement for helmets
Uh,
statewide?
Yes, but we put a point in there to really enforce it in our code as well.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Do we have any more discussion?
Well, I just have some brief comments.
Great.
I just want to say that this is, we have a lot of challenging issues that we deal with up here. This is not one of them. This seems to me like well thought out and common sense steps to take to keep everyone safe. And I don't want to belabor it, but I'm enthusiastically supporting this legislation.
Ditto.
Okay, any more, Jack, are you going to make a comment?
I was just saying, it's always good when the data drives the legislation, which in this case is what's happened. And it's unfortunate that the data is injuries and severe injuries. But nonetheless, it gives us an imperative, which, as Vice Mayor Wellner said, is fairly easy to act on because it's so clear.
Yes. Councilmember Nick Farr, did you have comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone who came out tonight. It's, taking your own time to come out and present this very important legislation and taking your time to come out and do public comment it's important, an important part of the process and helps us to try to make the right decision for our community. So thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Nick Farr. I believe we're ready for a vote. Lee, if you could please call the roll.
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Nick Farr,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wellner,
Yes.
and Mayor Thier.
Yes, yes, yes.
So this is first
Thank
and
you again. Yeah, this is the first reading and yes, thank you so much.
So someone has to read by title.
City, not first jurisdiction.
Right, first city, the county led.
Okay, Ben, could you please read it by title?
I've got it in front of me, Madam Mayor, so I'm going to read it if you don't mind.
Sure, of course, Lee.
An
Take-
ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Tiburon amending Title 6, Chapter 23, Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Tiburon Municipal Code to authorize the Marin Electric Bicycle Safety Program.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now we are going to, we need to do a motion to continue the last items. So I would like to move that we continue public hearing 1 and action item 1. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Before we do that, let's just make sure there's no public comment on any of those items before we continue it.
Is there any?
Seeing none.
Okay, if you could do the roll call vote, Lee.
Councilmember Fredericks,
We're voting on continuing AI 1.
And
And public hearing 1.
So that would be a yes.
Further point of order, does there need to be a date uncertain included or just continuing?
Wait, who's talking now?
The member of the public asked if there's a need to have a date continuance. I just want to remind the public.
No, we're
Public
not.
doesn't have the ability to have a point of order. That's only reserved
Okay,
for council members.
So they're both continued to an indefinite date. Okay, so could we please have the vote?
Councilmember Fredericks,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickbar,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wellner,
Yes.
and Mayor Thier.
Yes. And now we are going to move on to action item 1, which is under utility undergrounding assessment districts. If we could have a staff report.
Yeah, just a moment, Madam Mayor, while we get the presentation up. Madam Mayor, members of the council and the public, this item is related to utility assessment undergrounding districts. Tiburon has long supported the undergrounding of utilities. These typically come in 2 flavors. One are the Rule 20A projects, which are funded, which are town-initiated projects and typically funded by PG&E Rule 28 credits. I will note that the CPUC in the past year has spent a lot of time on this issue and is actually phasing out the Rule 28 program. So the likelihood of any, multiple future projects is slim. The other type of project.
Greg, we do have an open district for Rule 28 though at this time, don't we?
We do, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, we can talk about that at, during the focus of tonight's meeting are what we call Rule 20B projects. And these are projects that are typically initiated by the property owners and they're and funded by the owners and typically financed through the creation of what's called a utility undergrounding assessment district. The most recent examples here in Tiburon were the Hawthorne and Virginia districts that the town worked on from about 2016 till just a couple of months ago. At the time when the Virginia project was approved, the council placed a moratorium on the creation of any new districts and created an ad hoc subcommittee to review the existing undergrounding policy and then make recommendations to council. For a variety of reasons, including turnover in council and frankly no interest in the past several years from many groups interested, the work was delayed a bit. Recently, over the past few months, we've had several meetings with a group of residents on Mar West, and I believe a few folks are here this evening, about the formation of a district to underground utilities on a portion of Mar West. So that's what's sort of prompting this at this point. Well, I'll repeat this at the end. At the end of this item, we're going to be asking council to consider approving a revised policy framework recommended by the ad hoc subcommittee and direct staff to complete the policy revision based on that new framework. And we would bring that back to council at a future meeting. At the same time, we would ask council to consider lifting the moratorium on the formation of new undergrounding districts and direct staff to work with the Mar West owner group, continuing to explore the possibility of forming a new assessment district based on the new framework. Whoops. The undergrounding projects are complicated. They have a lot of steps, and they're largely guided by state law and the rules that are associated with tax-free financing as well. The town council does have some discretion, though, and in terms of how the projects are sort of envisioned, designed, paid for, and that was the focus of the work that the ad hoc committee did. So I'm going to briefly summarize first sort of the typical phases under the old policy, and then I'll talk a little bit about the new framework. So under the old policy, the first phase is what we call the exploratory phase, and I would say that's the phase we're in right now with the Mar West group. They've approached us, we've walked the proposed district a few times trying to understand any of the intricacies of it or differences. The second phase would really be the petition phase. And you'll see in the proposed framework, these two items remain the same. And I'm not going to go into great detail about all the intricacies of this, but the petition phase is where a group of interested owners essentially gather petitions from the owners in the proposed district, and they have to provide those petitions to the town with enough petitions indicating support to meet the minimum level and that's a state law, and I believe the petitions have to represent over 50% of the land area of the proposed district. Under the old policy and what was very typical in the town, I will mention to the council that no two projects are the same. So they all end up having their own some peculiar things we end up doing. But in general, under the old policy, the next phase would be producing what's called a preliminary engineer's report. And under the old policy, the property owners with their petitions had to submit enough what we call subscription deposits, which is money, essentially to pay for the cost of preparing the preliminary engineer's report. And then the next, once that preliminary engineer's report is complete, in the old policy, the property owners would actually vote to approve the report's contents, which includes a number of things, which is the estimated total project cost. And keep in mind that with a preliminary final engineer or preliminary report, the design is only about 50% complete. So the project cost estimate is an estimate. It also includes the proposed individual assessments on each property within the district based on that total project cost. And when the property owners vote, at this point, if the vote fails, the property owners would not recover any of the funding that they had given in subscription deposits. After that, but let's assume for a second the vote passes. The next step is what I call the financing stage, and the town would, assuming the council agrees and approves all of this, the town would issue bonds in an amount to cover the preliminary estimate. And then the last phase, well, then we would complete the design phase. We would sell bonds. We would take some of that bond proceeds to complete the design phase of the project. We would then bid the project and the construction phase. So there are some issues with the issues that sort of surround the old policy are summarized here. First of all, developing a preliminary engineer's report, and then following that with the final engineer's report increases the overall cost and timeline of the project. The homeowners sometimes have difficulty raising sufficient funds to complete the preliminary report. And because it's a preliminary estimate, the vote by the property owners and the amount of financing is based on a preliminary estimate. And as we all know, that sometimes estimates can be sometimes wildly off. And that would set up some difficult decisions to make if after the assessments have been approved, financing has been provided, that all of a sudden the project cost is dramatically more than what the preliminary cost was estimated at. So the ad hoc subcommittee, which is made up of currently Councilmember Ryan and Councilmember Fredericks, Matt discussed this several times and have come up with a revised framework for a new policy. And again, those first two phases would be the same. There'd be an exploratory phase and a petition phase. And then after this is, I've bolded and underlined these because these are the things that changed from one policy to the other. And under the new framework, we would essentially skip the preliminary engineering phase and we would complete the design, we would complete the entire final engineer's report to its final version, and we would actually bid the project based on the design. Under the new framework, to help the property owners get this done, in the petition phase, rather than asking the property owners to provide enough funding to do the preliminary engineer's report, we would have a sort of a standard contribution from property owners and again, this is a proposal that would be the greater of $50,000 or 1% of the estimated total project cost when submitting petitions. And I failed to tell you during the petition must include some estimate of the project. So in this instance, the estimate would be provided by the town based on past projects, perhaps spending a little bit of money on a very early estimate. But that's how it would work in this. But again, this is sort of one of the major changes. So then the town, in this instance, the cost of producing the final engineer's report, which includes all the design engineering and assessment engineering, can be expensive, and we'll touch on that in a couple of slides. But under the proposed framework, the town would provide the bridge funding for the remaining costs to complete the final engineer's report. So if the property owners contributed $50,000, the town would provide the bridge funding to complete the report and get to a vote. So then the next phase would be the property owner. So we'd be at a final design at that point, final engineer's report. We would have actually bid the project. So we have an actual construction bid to work with. Based on all that information, this is when the property owner vote would occur. So the property owners would vote based on final engineer's report, which includes a total project cost. It would also include the individual property assessments. So here, if the vote fails, the town would not be reimbursed for the costs that it bridged in that earlier phase to finish the report. But if the vote was successful, the town would be reimbursed 100% of the cost. The underlying premise of utility assessment districts virtually everywhere is that the property owners should bear the cost of doing the project. This revised framework helps them get to that point by bridging that funding gap to get to a vote or a design phase. So again, if the vote was successful, the next phase would be financing. And again, the financing would be based on the actual construction bids and a much better understanding of what the total project cost would be. And then there would be a construction phase. So the summary of the proposed changes is to eliminate the preliminary engineer's report. We would require a final engineer's report to be completed and a project bid before we vote, the property owners vote. We'd require property owners to collectively provide $50,000 or 1% of the estimated project cost, whatever number is greater, when they submit their petitions. And then the town would provide the bridge funding for the remainder of the cost. And again, the town would be reimbursed if the project moves forward. So to get a sense of kind of what these projects look like in terms of cost, I'm going to just run you very quickly through the Virginia and the Hawthorne projects. So for Virginia, that cost to get to the final engineer's report was $225,477. That was made up of the primary civil engineer, Harris Engineering, doing the assessment engineering and the civil work, and there are also some costs that we have to pay to the utilities for designing their upgrades. There are some miscellaneous administrative costs associated with this phase. So for Virginia, this early phase to get to the final engineer's report was about $250,477. And to give you kind of a sense of how that fits in the big scheme of things, the total project cost was about $1.45 million in Virginia. So that early cost to get to the engineer's report represented 17.3% of the project. I should have said earlier, and to remind council, these two projects could not have been more different. So, Hawthorne was a large, sprawling, complex project for a number of reasons I don't need to go into now, where Virginia was a very small, one street, at 23 homes, I believe. It was a very straightforward project. So Hawthorne, the design and engineering costs were $536,000, plus there was utility engineering costs of about $55,000. So you get a total of about $591,000. Again, you add the miscellaneous admin costs, you get a total sort of design and engineering costs of $616,601. The total project cost was about $8.68 million. This represents 7.1% of the project cost. So when we look at, say, a hypothetical Mar West project, I would characterize the Mar West project as much closer to the Virginia project than the Hawthorne project in terms of complexity. It's relatively straightforward based on our several field visits. It's bigger than the Virginia project, but it's not nearly as big as Hawthorne and not nearly as complicated in many ways. So I want to caution everybody, including the folks in the room who are Mar West, that this is just literally a back of the napkin estimate. So based on the trench length that we observed and measured, And based on some historical costing and that, let's assume for a second that the total project cost for Mara West would be about $2.7 million. If you were going to, predict what that preliminary engineering or the engineer's report would cost, Virginia was about 17% of the project cost. Hawthorne was 7%. I think Mara West is much closer to Virginia than Hawthorne. So I just randomly said, okay, what if it was 15%? That'd be $405,000 to get to a final engineer's report. In this instance, under the new framework, that's $50,000 is greater than 1% of the estimated project costs. So under the new framework, you'd be asking the property owners to contribute $50,000. The town would bridge the remaining $355,000 of funding for this project. So that just gives you an example of how it would work in this instance.
I'm sorry, can you go back a slide? So you're saying that 50,000 is greater than 1% of the engineering report cost or of the project cost?
The total project cost. So the total project is 2.7 million. 1% would be 27,000. So the 50,000 is greater than.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Sure.
So the funded by town amount, $355,000. Actually, the town gets this back if the bond issue.
If the project goes forward, the town would be reimbursed this funding.
Yeah, and what's the reasoning behind the bridge payment? It's because it's difficult to raise money without selling the bonds, so the town's going to help.
So I didn't hear the first part of the question.
So right now, under the old system, the town isn't providing this money, right?
Correct.
So this is the example with Mara West is that in order to facilitate this, the town is providing a $355,000 loan that's at risk if the project doesn't go forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I will say, I mentioned earlier, every project is different. Hawthorne is a difficult one to compare to anything. And we don't need to revisit all the things that happened during the Hawthorne project.
But where did the 1% number come from?
It was a proposal by the ad hoc subcommittee. And I can give you background on that.
Yeah, please.
So basically.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So my thinking was, for Hawthorne, we raised $150,000, and the estimated project cost was $8.5 million initially. And we probably could not have raised another penny. Like, that took us over a year to do. So the idea that everyone should raise, whatever percent that is, just seemed unreasonable or unlikely. Like, if we want to support utility undergrounding, we can't ask people to go raise a bunch of money just because it's hard.
So
right?
I guess, no, I don't want to know.
No, go ahead.
I guess my thought about it is this. Right now, and we're having a discussion here, so it's okay for me to do this? Okay. I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but
Can I just ask a question? Is the presentation done?
no.
I think there's just literally one more slide or two. So would you like me to finish? And
It's up to John. John, do you want to just say your piece and then we'll finish?
I have a clarifying question about this.
Okay.
The initial estimate is based off of trench length and the engineering costs for the report. Those are for a third party.
meaning we would pay that to a third party?
Yes.
That's correct.
Are there in other towns? Do the towns ever do the engineering report themselves?
No, this is these are very complex construction projects.
Is it something that PG&E or whoever was going to do the work could do? It seems very disjointed, where it's kind of like you're hiring an architect, then you're going to find a builder, where in some cases, I'm not saying this is a simple project by any means, but there's no way to get it all included in one sort of process. And whoever's sort of pitching for the business comes up with an engineering report.
Well, I mean, that's
part of that pitch.
That's essentially what we're doing. We would be that $405,000 cost would very likely be a contract with one vendor who does both the civil engineering, the actual construction drawings, as well as what's called the assessment engineering. And that's what's unique about these projects is whoever does the engineer's report has to have somebody working for them or ability to contract who's an assessment engineer, and it's a very specialized sort of field. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question. We are going to one vendor to do the to do the engineer's report. PG&E will not design the project for you, but they have their own design requirement. They need to review the plans, and they need to be consulted on the project thoroughly because you are essentially building PG&E infrastructure here, so it has to be done to their standards.
But is it one of those things like the IRS where they tell you you need to guess and figure out how much you owe them, and then they also have a calculation on their end where they know what they think you owe, and they look at the two numbers where we're going to do an engineering report, and then PG&E is going to do their own engineering report but not charge for it, and then make sure they are close?
No, PG&E doesn't do they don't look at the project from a civil engineering perspective. They need to design their infrastructure. So for instance, many of these projects they all require new transformers to be put in underground vaults. So PG&E needs to be the entity that sort of designs what's in those vaults. It's their stuff. So the civil engineer that we hire to do the plans and specs for the trench is essentially what we're building is what's called a joint trench, where we put in conduits for multiple utilities. Each one of the utilities has a say in how it's designed. None of them will fully design the project. They're more interested in the size of the wire, where the transformers are, and where the equipment is, as opposed to the trench itself, if that makes sense.
Why don't you finish and then we'll go.
Okay, I'm just going to go real quick. So I was going to say, I was just about done, but really the questions that council may want to discuss is, does council support the revised framework as proposed by the ad hoc subcommittee? If so, what level of contribution should be required of the property owners to complete the engineer's report? And does the council wish to lift the moratorium on new district formation, allowing the Mar West project to continue to percolate? So.
Okay, thank you so much. John, why don't you go ahead with your questions or comments?
Sure. And I just want to say, Jack, did you have something quick you wanted to say? You looked like you were about to.
No, I want you to ask, and then I have a lot to say, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So, if I could ask, could you go back to the slide we were looking at with the 1%? There, that one. Okay. So I like the new approach for a number of reasons, but I like the town encouraging people to make it as easy as possible for neighbors to organize and do undergrounding districts, because I think they're important both for safety and beautification purposes, and we want to enable people to invest in that if they can overcome the collective action problem of a neighborhood and move forward. So, in general, I'm supportive of this approach. I'm a little concerned, particularly because if this is kind of the path, as this isn't, what's a big project? This is probably not. This is not the biggest project we might have in the future. What's
Well, when you look at areas of Tiburon, and I don't unfortunately have a map of the areas that still have overhead utilities, but when you really look, I don't know if there are any really big projects out there anymore. I mean, maybe Jack has a better.
So you think this is probably at the top of the range?
No, I would say this is still in the mid to smaller. I mean, there may be a Hawthorne or two project out there still in terms of numbers of houses. I think David's here. How many houses did we count? 40?
This one.
The Mar West project is one. Yeah. You said about 40.
Well, it's
45 for that.
Exactly. The point is, I feel it's the naked at-risk approach that is making me nervous, especially if it's a policy to be replicated over and over again, depending on, in different circumstances. And certainly once you do it as a policy for one or two it's expected that you'll do it for all. I guess, I don't know if this is possible, but I guess what I'm thinking is this. I would feel more comfortable with this kind of approach because I understand the difficulty of getting cash up front. I would be okay with the town providing this bridge loan if the consequences were a little different. So in other words, right now, the bridge loan, the city or the town basically pays it. And then if the project goes forward, there are bonds issued and it gets replenished. I would feel more comfortable if there was some way of having a loan, but maybe we have a preliminary vote among the neighbors or something where a much, much smaller bond would be issued to pay us back for that amount if the project doesn't go forward. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, if there was, in order for a neighborhood to move forward with a project, they would at least have to be able to vote to cover the bridge loan if it fails. And then if they do that, then we'll provide the bridge loan. And if the project succeeds, then there's a much bigger bond sale that happens and we get the money back. But if the project fails, the town isn't left with a bridge loan that's unpaid. That's just I'm just brainstorming up here on the dais, but it seems to me that's asking a little bit more of the neighborhood to get organized ahead of time, and it requires then 2 votes instead of 1. But I'm bothered by the kind of blank check nature of saying it's 50,000 is all you pay, town will cover the rest, and then if you decide not to go forward, the town just loses the money. That seems almost like an encouragement of gambling. Like, let's see how much it costs, and oh, it's too much. We won't proceed.
So, go ahead.
Jack and I did not always agree because I was.
Yeah, your microphone I don't think is on. Is that possible?
I didn't want it.
There we go.
I had some of the same concerns, and Jack and I had some interesting debates about this. How do you justify this loan to a subsection of the community? What is the benefit to the whole community? And how would you assess that? So I'm not offering this as a rationalization. It's just a thinkum. One kind of a benefit to the whole community is if this is a collector street rather than a dead-end street, so neighborhoods would have to use it to escape, and they would be concerned about the poles coming down, and that certainly is a big concern in this community now. And then the other benefit to the whole community or the surrounding community, I don't know how things are connected by PG&E, is increasing the probability of electrical service continuing to the whole community. Now, those are not enormous or quantifiable benefits, but they are thinkums. So my other concern attached to this is how do you provide the motivation for the final vote from the bond district to be yes? Because sometimes when people see the whole costs or they consider the cost of their laterals, they get itchy feet. And I think one way to do that, before I heard your suggestion, was just to have a bigger upfront deposit in order to participate as a motivator. It's a different mechanism.
And my proposal would be, it's not quite as direct as yours in terms of, asking them to put up more, but basically what it does is it says, look, the sunk cost here, this 355,000, you're gonna have to pay anyway. So it's the difference between what you've already made the town invest and the total cost that you're voting on.
No, I think it's much more elegant than anything I thought of.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off actually by apologizing to Greg because I'm going to take some pot shots at the town in this. But I think he's done a disservice.
He doesn't mind if you take pot shots at him as long as you apologize ahead of time.
With the amount of money he's saying that the engineering would cost for More West. And I have several reasons why I think that that's an overstatement, but I think that now, like when you see $300,000 versus 50, I can understand why that would give you pause in terms of like,
Doesn't seem like an even split, right?
That's right. And I think it's probably closer to Virginia than to Hawthorne, given that the project cost is estimated to be closer to Virginia than Hawthorne's. So I think it's weird that the number was up there that high. I think it's probably more 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 that what we're talking about here in terms of a loan, generally speaking. So just, but circling back, I mean, just taking it way back to where I'm coming from on this idea. I also think you're underestimating the psychology of people putting up money up front and knowing that they will lose it if they vote no. I think the fact that we're requiring a security deposit is very powerful in getting people who are serious and who are going to vote yes to vote yes. And therefore ensure the safety of ours, because essentially their money is at first loss, the way we would write the policy. So if we, whatever is lost, they lose all of it for sure, right? But so just stepping back, when you think about utility undergrounding and how a town can support it, as far as I can tell, there are 2 municipalities in California that are prolific undergrounders. One is Belvedere and one is Newport Beach. Newport Beach has done over 70 districts, and they have done like 5 miles of beachfront that they've undergrounded. And none of the projects, to answer an earlier question, was more than $10 million. I think I saw the biggest one I saw was $9 million. But the way that our policy, the policy we used to have differs from Belvedere and Newport Beach is 3 ways. One, their petition threshold is lower. They only require 50% of their neighbors.
I'm sorry, can you compare what they're doing to the new proposal?
Yep, I will. So the 3 ways. The petition threshold is slightly different. The second thing is they require no subscription deposit from their residents. And then
You're gonna have to explain what you mean.
So the money that the neighbors would have to put up front,
The
the
$50,000?
$50,000.
Okay.
Neither Newport
No
Beach
initial
nor
payment.
Belvedere requires that, 0. And then thirdly, they provide a bridge loan for the entire engineering up front, right? So those are the 3 differences from our old policy.
And have they ever lost the money?
So Belvedere lost one, and they lost $130,000 on Lower Golden Gate. Yes. Newport Beach has never lost one, but so that's where I think that bringing our policy closer to theirs makes sense with the safety mechanism of requiring the citizens to put up a subscription deposit as part of the investment. And then the other thing I'll say, like, with respect to estimates, and the reason why we need to move away from the preliminary engineer's report.
No, it's wild. It can be wild.
Yes. No, I'm going to say it because it's worth hearing. In Hawthorne, the town, we initially, as residents, came up with our own estimate for the cost. It was like 6.3 million. And we did petitions, and the town was like, that number's wrong. We're like, well, okay, you tell us. Like, what number do you want us to put on there? So they hired Harris, who was already going to be hired to do the other stuff. And I forget what you guys paid, 25 or 30 grand. And they said it's going to be 8.5 million. Like, okay. So we put that on petitions, we got the petitions, we come back. The preliminary engineer's report that we voted on was $13 million. So as a resident, you signed a petition saying like, all right, I'm going to pay my fair share of 8 million. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I have to authorize.
Up with the 8?
Harris, the engineer, the engineer that the town hired. And they just did
not the engineer for the preliminary.
It was the same engineer. It was the same engineer. But because of just the structure of like Greg and the town, they do not want the voters to approve a bond amount that isn't sufficient to cover the
Right, I
cost.
understand.
And since the numbers aren't real, a whole bunch of contingencies get put in there. I mean, the difference between 8.5 million and 13 million, though, to people's assessments was like, 70 grand to 100. Like, that's real money,
And then in the end, how much was it?
8.5 million. It was 8.6 million. Like, it was spot on. And so it's important that we get the preliminary report out of there because it adds uncertainty to the voters who have already put money up, and we still passed it, right? And we put up 1.6% of the project cost.
And the reason the preliminary report is currently in this, the original reason why it was in the system is basically that was one strategy for dealing with this cost of designing the project.
It's the cheapest way to get to a vote, to get to the point where the state will allow you to vote. And the town policy said the town will contribute no money. So we were kind of hamstrung as a town, and we had to do that with resident money because the policy specifically said we can't contribute money.
I mean, I guess what I think is, and again, this is all new.
Yeah.
But my reaction is, I think it benefits the whole town to encourage undergrounding for safety and beauty and lots of reasons. I feel like this is potentially too lopsided and too costly for individual projects, especially if we start to lose control of them in terms of how many come down the pike. Right now, we haven't seen any in a while, so it seems like.
But we could easily put in the policy that there can be no more than 2 active districts, right?
But that's also not what we're trying to achieve. So I guess what I think is either there has to be a way to claw back the money, or I think it needs to be closer to, I mean, I think there needs to be a percentage of the design cost as opposed to a maximum of 50. In other words, the fairest sounding approach is to make it 50-50, but I understand you're saying that might price people out, but it just feels like essentially the 50,000 is almost token at this point.
You live in a different neighborhood than I do. A 50,000.
No, but compared to the whole cost, I mean, it's like.
Agreed, but again, like that's why you're playing, like you're kind of talking about the psychology of the neighborhood and of individual contributors, like.
And the initial money is just raised. It's just pure donation.
That's right.
It's just passing the hat in the neighborhood.
That's right. So we had 50 neighbors give us $3,000 each. And I was in their houses shaking them down for that money.
And how many neighbors are in this project?
Again, I think there's 40 something properties.
Yeah, let me count it quickly.
While he's looking for that number, I'd just like to comment that we're definitely in the discussion phase right now.
Yeah.
So I think we should take public comment before we
Okay.
continue the discussion phase,
Oh, all right.
unless there's any questions left.
Thank you so much, Ben. At this time, I'd like to take public comment. Is there anyone in the council chamber that would like to make a comment? Great. If you could state your name, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Erin Giacopo. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Council. I am the chairperson of the proposed Wish to Be Mar West District, and we have a very enthusiastic group of neighbors. We started conversations about over a year ago and meeting with David and finding out about the moratorium. And we've had many meetings. We did our own sort of preliminary petition and received 70% agreement to move forward. Of course, we would have to redo that with the deposit and all of the things that you're discussing under the new framework. But we wanted to take a pulse of the neighborhood and see what kind of support we had. And we were really very enthusiastically pleased at receiving that number. And, it's just been an exciting proposition. We have a great team of people working on it who are giving of their time and their resources and their abilities to move it forward. And we just thank you so much for your consideration, and special thanks to David and Greg, who have been very transparent and forthcoming with us about the development of the old policy and the new policy. And so we would just respectfully ask that you would lift the moratorium and approve the new framework so that we can move forward with our project. Mar West is a beautiful historic street, and we have a tremendous amount of power lines. And so it would really elevate and upgrade the whole town to have those wires underground in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do we have more public comment in the room? Lee?
Yes,
We have one.
Thank
do.
you so much. I can't see people walking up. I can only see the council. So thank you so much. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name.
Okay, my name is Alexandra Owen. I'm sorry, I've got a little bit of laryngitis, but it's not catching. But anyway, I just wanted to add to what Erin Jacopo was just saying, was that the safety issue is very important. We've had the fire brigade out there when one of the transformers exploded at 2 o'clock in the morning. And also what happens is during your, when you're working on your computers, which everybody does nowadays, the electricity goes in and out and it does stop certain things. So certain appliances, for instance, don't reboot themselves when the thing comes on. So there's a lot of expenses that come on to the homeowners with this without it being undergrounded. And as Erin says, it's much more beautiful. It's a great asset for the town. And I think everybody needs as much encouragement as possible to go ahead with this project. And we definitely need the help from the city to back it and to know that they are going to be, it's basically their insurance to tell us that we are backing you, we're backing it, and we are also, as residents or homeowners, that we are actually going to be backing it ourselves. We're very serious about this. Obviously, we spent a whole year getting to this point with all the different meetings that we've had to have. We are serious, and we're going through with the project. So, all these reassurances about you're getting your money back, we need to know that you are also, as the town, serious, and you're backing us all the way. And we've got each other's backs. That's really what it's about. So some people are retired, other people have problems, financial problems or whatever it is, but everybody still wants to go ahead with it. So I think that's something you have to bear in mind. And we're not all young, and we're not all, she says, especially with my voice, I sound terrible, but it's just that it's kind of difficult at our age to earn more money. You think you've retired, you think you've got a little nest egg, and that nest egg just disappears very quickly. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Lee, is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak?
Seeing none.
And online, do we have any speakers online?
Seeing none.
Okay, so we will go back to the council discussion. I have a comment that I'd like to make. I've made this comment before, but I believe that PG&E should pay for undergrounding their own infrastructure. I don't think our residents should pay, or the town. But I'm going to let that comment stand and go back to the discussion that we were having. Who would like to speak next?
May I say something?
Yeah, I believe Jack was in the middle of it. Okay, go on, please.
So, thank you for those comments. So I guess my question to Councilmember Fredericks is there a percentage of the total cost that seems more interesting and palatable to you that creates the ratio that you like? And the reason I am asking that, and I just worry that Vice Mayor Wellner's idea is really quite complicated in terms of how we would implement it. And it definitely adds expenses if you're issuing two bonds, and like it kind of adds to the administrative overhead. So is there a ratio where you feel more comfortable? And by the way, like the part of the reason that I feel like the Virginia engineering costs were high as a percentage of the project, and like you guys can yell at me if you want, but we contracted with Harris. When we went out for the Hawthorne project, we solicited bids from all these engineering firms. With Virginia, we already had Harris under contract for Virginia, so we just went to them.
Yeah.
And so I think they probably kind of gooned us a little bit, They sort of had us as the captive customer.
Yeah.
And once you hire them as a preliminary engineering firm to do the preliminary report, they kind of know they're also going to do the full report, so they can charge you more. If you just bid out the full engineering plans first, you're probably going to get a better.
So I have a new idea.
All right.
It's simpler. Maybe. And this
Now
will,
you're the idea factory.
this probably requires Ben's input, but, or, well, Ben or Greg, but, issuing bonds twice is complicated, I know. But we don't really need bonds because in this case, the town's just fronting the money, right? So we don't need bonds for that. The town's basically signed up to pay whatever that the difference is. Would it be possible for the neighborhood to agree or to have to agree in order to get that money, that if the project doesn't go forward, it would be added, just like paying off the project, it would be added to property tax over 10 years? Or something like that? That's not possible to do?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we'd have to talk to our bond counsel for that, but I'm
Because
pretty
right now,
certain
property tax is only usable to pay off bonds as opposed to pay a loan from the town?
the loan would have to be reduced into an assessment. That's the issue. So
Assessment
you can't do
district.
that privately by contract, is what I think I'm understanding your proposal to be.
I don't really care. I mean, I'm not focused on the mechanism. I'm just focusing on the payback method. I did just that there is a payback.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could come up with a payback method, not as a tax that would be on the rolls. It would be some sort of, security interest that we'd have to devise that could be a lien on the house, right? I mean, that's,
People don't like liens.
no, I understand, but that's,
That will motivate them to vote yes.
It would, but I don't know. I don't necessarily feel that the whole amount, I mean, I'm not worried about the town helping somewhat.
Yeah.
I just feel like, I think, you said your neighborhood wound up paying 3,000 per neighbor. I presume some people didn't pay and other people fronted money or something like that, right?
Correct. We had 120 houses and 54 of them contributed to it.
Right, to an average of 3,000 a house, like
Yeah,
that.
it was most of them did.
I would just point out that 50,000 for what's being, for 40 houses is.
39 house, well, we don't know the actual boundary yet, but based on our quick,
But it's
39, 40
more
house,
closer to 1,000 a house as opposed to 3,000, so it's a much lower.
Well, I mean, but per house, we only collected on average like $1,300.
No, but this is what we have to go on. It's the amount of money per house is kind of what your neighborhood was able to generate to contribute.
But you can't use the denominator as the total houses here and only the contributors in Hawthorne. It's either all the houses.
You're
or just-
saying that the contributors all paid 3,000 and that's all that was paid.
I mean, there were like 4 houses that paid less, but 50 houses paid $3,000.
Oh, I didn't understand.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought
No.
every house paid 3,000, but those that didn't pay were fronted by others.
No.
Okay.
There were 70 that did not pay at all, that paid 0. Right, and so we had to be super confident that we were going to get a yes vote because
Or
we
you
had-
were just.
we were
yeah,
going to lose
right,
150
right,
grand,
right.
and we only had 50 out of the 120 property owners.
But
again, like,
Jack, can I
yeah.
ask you a question, Jack?
Of course.
Did the homeowners then did they pay for the connection to their home?
Yes, on top of that as well.
People that did, but the people that did not fund, that weren't their original 50, did they pay for the connection to their home after the work was done?
Yes, everybody had to, yeah. Yeah, because you get voted into the district.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But, and it's, yeah. So that's why I keep circling back to Belvedere and Newport Beach, because I just think they're doing it without any measures of safety. And I really think that
Well, I mean, that's. okay.
having the neighbors have first loss money is a very powerful motivating factor.
And how many jurisdictions are doing underground without fronting the money? I mean, there are 2 that are, so that means.
Nobody's undergrounding. That's the thing. Like we're 3rd in the state in undergrounding projects in the last 15 years.
And so my neighborhood actually undergrounded. And the organizers were so motivated that when there were people who were having financial
Right,
considerations, the neighbors kicked in.
Yeah. that's what I thought.
It was a real community effort.
We
yeah.
tried to do that and we couldn't get anywhere with it.
So that just shows you that districts and probably cities too are different with respect to what they're willing to do to underground.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess I think the new approach is compelling. I think it's probably a little much to ask for a presentation, introduction to the council to these concepts, and then a vote yes on the same night. I'd like to think about it a little bit and maybe talk with staff about options.
I have a couple, just a clarification. whatever our policy is that we bring forward doesn't require us to fund that district. So if we came up with something tonight, maybe even if we said we wanted to try a pilot, whatever came back in terms of the cost for engineering, for the engineering report, we'd still have to vote on the budget line item. We're not sort of giving a blank check to any district to just sort of go out there and get overcharged and we'll cover the difference. So it's still gotta come,
yeah.
it's still gotta come to us and for us to approve it.
It's just more difficult when you lay out a path, they follow
It
it,
is,
they
but,
come back, and then you say, nah.
You know, I'm probably not supposed to do this, but I did look at Newport and Belvedere and sort of see ballpark what they were paying out for those things, and it looked like they're paying about a third to a quarter of what we're estimating these costs to be. So I don't know why Belvedere and Newport get cheaper $100,000 engineering reports and we're paying $400,000 for engineering reports. Seems crazy, but
Well, don't forget, we sued our bond counsel and our engineer in 2008. And you know what happened? Nobody wanted to work with Tiburon after that. So I have one reason why.
I have
See also Piedmont. No one will work with Piedmont, man.
okay.
Can
Well,
I-
so the kind of the clarifying, the other clarifying question is, in this district, is the TPC part of that district that will be involved in undergrounding, or are they kind of pulling a hacienda and staying out of it?
As they've currently suggested, they don't really go past Beach/Esperanza.
Okay.
So TPC would not. But the town lost that lawsuit and we had to pay $1.6 million. So that's real money.
And the lawsuit was based on a claim that they overcharged?
No, that
What was the
we didn't proportionally assess the benefits and the costs, which was in violation of state law. And that's roughly it, right? You don't need to answer.
But to something more positive,
Was that
I would
proportionally
like-
assessing benefits
excuse me.
and, oh yeah, I
Go-
totally,
go-
I know
go.
I cut you off. I'm sorry about that.
but I got cut you off first.
Okay, someone go.
Embarrassing show of politeness.
Yeah.
Yes, embarrassing show of politeness.
I'll go first because I'm going to suggest something positive. While we might not be ready to vote on the exact formation of this particular district, we could vote independently on the general notion of reinstating the possibility to form districts, and I would suggest we do that.
That's a great idea.
Well, I definitely think it's my sense, based on what everyone's saying, that is the intent of the council, but can we vote to allow districts to form but not have a policy about how they form? I don't think.
We can ask the staff to bring back, a discussion with information, yeah? Question mark, that was a question mark.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
To split the decision between voting to reinstate underground district formation and the decision of what that policy would look like.
I mean, certainly you could vote to lift the moratorium. We can't go very much further than we are with the folks on Mar West without understanding the rules of how it's going to work. Because really the next phase is the petition phase, the official petition phase for a district. And, you know, the property owners would need to understand, I think, the process laid out before they would want to, you know, sign a petition or submit the petitions.
So I think you're saying that we shouldn't defer the decision on what the policy should be.
Oh, I mean, the council can defer the decision for as long as they'd like. I don't believe lifting the moratorium, I don't think serves unnecessarily a purpose at this point without a policy to back it up.
Well, it shows
No,
a certain goodwill to go forward. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, I support, I think, moving forward on this, and it sounds like we need to get close to consensus on maybe the ratio that we would feel comfortable with. Is there a ratio, I guess, I'd sort of put out an open question, is there a ratio that my fellow council members are comfortable with? And maybe it's 1-to-1 or 1-to-2
Yeah, I
or
think
something
it's
like that,
50%.
but I'm just sort of curious, is there sort of a middle ground here where we could potentially move this forward because I think we all support undergrounding and it's a really important project. And, you know, and we've had some wonderful folks from Mar West that have come out tonight to help support it. I would hate for them to leave empty-handed when we have the opportunity to kind of move forward on this in some meaningful way.
So could we, and I still might make a motion to approve this proposal anyway. Could we?
I don't doubt it.
Could we lift the moratorium on the old policy, have them proceed under that while we contemplate a new substitute policy in the
Yes.
meantime? Because the first two phases are kind of the same.
Greg doesn't like that one.
I know.
Well, no, you're already past, we're already in one. The next phase.
Can I just ask Ben whether that's something we can do?
You can do, yeah, you can do that, but I think you should hear
Okay.
the town manager about why that might not make sense right now with this district.
Sure. Go ahead,
Well,
Greg.
I'll just remind why we're here is there's some dissatisfaction with the old policy. And, the root of that is this two-step process where we produce a preliminary engineer's report, paid for by the property owners, and then they vote and, then we move forward. So again, if we want to lift the moratorium under the old policy, are we saying that the folks in Mar West, we just follow the old policy from start to finish and it would be the next project that's the new policy? When do we change the, when does everybody understand what the rules are? Is what I'm trying to figure out.
Great question. And my thinking when I just threw that out there and just came up with it was that it would allow them to create a petition and solicit and identify a boundary and solicit subscription deposits. Those
They
three
wouldn't
things.
know how much they're fundraising for.
More is the answer. More is always better, right? No, I mean, right, you're right. They don't know exactly what they need in aggregate, but to start the process and to try to get $2,000 a house might be beneficial to them. I don't know.
With the contingency that they might come back for more, should we set the deposit at a higher limit?
Why don't we just do it and set it at 50% now and then see if they can do it?
50%?
So,
What?
so
The cost of the engineering.
yeah, so I wouldn't support that just because I think it's unrealistic. Like, there's no way in Hawthorne we could have raised 250 grand. Like, just no way.
And so your engineering report, the design for the project was 500,000?
Roughly, right?
Yeah, I don't need to pull the slide back up. It was.
That was
Why
including a
why do we think that
preliminary
we're
and
paying
a-
that and Belvedere's paying 100,000 for engineering reports?
Well, they're different size districts, right? So, I mean, it's just like an architect, right? Like it's a percentage of the total.
No, I
cost
understand, but I'm
estimate.
just, surely Belvedere and Newport Beach are doing districts at least as big as ours.
Not as, yeah.
Newport is. for
Newport is, but
Belvedere
Hawthorne's,
are
I mean,
tiny. They're like
Belvedere is
15
not.
houses, 18 houses, that kind of size.
Belvedere is?
Yeah, the Acacia one was bigger than that. It was like a $5 million district, I think, right? It was a bigger project, right? But
I
mean,
don't
Hawthorne had some,
remember all the
had
projects
some
in Belvedere.
engineering issues, just like going down Caltrans. Like, there was a lot of hair on it for sure.
And how do we know how much, is the way that we know the number of, the amount of money that has to ultimately be raised, that number that you had at 355,000, is the way we know that because we go through a bidding process for it and then we pick the bid and we know that it's X amount?
If we're able to get competitive proposal, in this instance, we're contracting for professional service, so we're not required to go with a low bid, just to be clear. It's not it's not like a construction
But we
bid.
get a real bid.
Yeah, but we have
get a-
proposals. Yeah,
And
we
then
have
we know what the
proposals
amount is.
from engineering companies, so.
So I guess the other way we could do this, as long as we're being creative and I sense a desire to move forward, we could not set the percentage and we can say the process is get the amount and then the council will decide how much the city is willing to pay and how as a bridge payment and how much they need to raise on a case by case basis. And then we'll get a number for each project that says this is how much the engineering is. We'll know how many houses are involved and we'll make a judgment at that point how much the town is willing to provide as a bridge loan.
Wait, I'm lost on this. Where are they supposed to get the number?
So we would issue a request for proposals to engineering companies to provide proposals to serve as the district engineer.
Specific approach.
Yeah.
So it would be the cost of.
The cost of
hire-
designing the project.
First
Okay, and so we get an estimate from the engineer of what the cost.
Of cost will be to design the project. And then when we get that number and we have a district that wants to proceed, we can decide as a council at that time what we think is fair for the town to provide as a bridge loan and how much they would need to raise as a petition. As a subscription, what do you call it?
Subscription deposit, yeah.
That way we're not setting a number, not knowing, it's instead of a one size fits all, we're like, okay, you said every district is different size, different challenges. As a council, we decide.
And it allows the neighborhood to understand if they want to take that bite or if they.
And it allows the people who live in the neighborhood to come to the council and present why they think a certain amount is the right number, and
it's based on as near a real number as we can get.
it'll be a real number.
Be a real number.
Not as near.
Okay. So would you like to make that motion?
Not to do the project. It's a bid to design the project.
It's a bid to design the project,
Yes.
not an estimate.
No.
It's a fixed
That's
bid.
what we're moving away from because the estimate
That's great.
was difficult.
So would you like to make that motion, and is it acceptable to our ad hoc committee? I would like to know that.
Feedback from the staff first.
I mean, here, that probably makes the most sense of all the options I've heard tonight. You know, there's no real issue. It's just so I hear you. What you're suggesting is, you know, we'll continue to work with the Mar West folks to to the extent we can at this point, formalize what the district boundaries are.
Right.
And then we would do like a request for proposal. We may just call engineering firms. It may not be an official document that we put out, but we may just solicit, you know, proposals from engineering firms based on these proposed district boundaries. What is your proposed cost to serve as a district engineer and produce the final engineer's report? Basically, is what we're doing.
We get a number, and then
we
come
would get
back.
those numbers. We'd have hopefully several numbers to choose from, and come back to council. I'm just thinking this through in my head, and then council would be informed by that number, and they would tell the district, this is how much money you need when you finally do your petitions. This is the amount of money you need to raise in subscription deposits as part of that cost. Did that summarize?
That is the proposal.
Okay.
I really like the fixed percentage better.
Why?
I just think it's weird to consider every single one individually.
They're not. It's not like there's a flood. I mean, we're gonna have.
Well,
to
let
No, but you just said we're worried about a
let me just mention one other thing. Whatever we decide on today, right, could be altered later. And we also could put in some sort of general guidance or you know, or something like that if we wanted to.
We could
Or put,
design criteria to think about.
Yeah, and we could do that at a later date. But it would be I think it'd be a really good idea to do what we can to get some consensus and move forward on for this neighborhood today.
I totally agree with you. And
I mean, I guess what I think is ironic, and I'm hoping that this breaks through to you, but I think what's ironic is what you didn't like about the prior policy were estimates without knowing, because the preliminary estimate was wildly off. So why do you want to operate while we're estimating what the cost is when we could actually have the real cost in front of us when we make a decision?
So
Why should we estimate it?
wait a minute. I thought that the subscription.
The current approach would be to pick a percentage, and we're basing it on numbers that we're estimating.
We would still have to approve a budget item. So
I know, but if we
wouldn't kind of
pick a
go-
percentage now, that's going to be. I mean, if we say 50,000 the maximum, that's
that was
going
a
to be kind
minimum.
of
That was a
de
minimum, by the
facto.
way.
What?
That was a minimum, by the way. 50,000.
Is the minimum.
Yeah.
Thank you. Whatever we decide, it's going to be difficult and probably unfair to change after the neighbors act on it with a petition.
Yes.
But I think for everyone, let's find out how much it is, and then make a decision about how much the town will spend taxpayer money to be a bridge loan. And if the neighbors at that point feel they can go forward and raise that money, everyone will know what's in front of them.
Wait, can you clarify something for me? So the amount of the subscription would be based on the engineer's bid for him designing the project rather than the actual construction of the project?
Correct, because the construction of the project is paid for ultimately by bonds. What the bridge loan, what that 355,000 was what the town was going to loan basically the neighbors to get the design done.
And then clarify for me, the bridge loan would be what?
What
Based
we
on
decide
what?
as a council.
So that's still hanging there, what the town puts out.
It would be decided on a case-by-case basis.
Let me play back what the process we're saying could look like with this, with lifting the moratorium, where we lift the moratorium and say proceed and go out for bid on the engineering work. Town staff will also, in parallel, work with the neighborhood to create the district and dot the i's and cross the t's in that process. When the bid comes back from the engineering firm, then that's where we would be able to understand what the cost of that engineering work is, and then figure out what we wanted
How much
to.
the town will
Exactly,
contribute.
what the town wanted to contribute, and also see if the neighborhood has sticker shock on the whole project, because if the cost is completely prohibitive, then the neighborhood may just say, look, we don't want to do this at all, based off of what this estimate
Although
looks like.
that won't, that's the cost to design the project. It
Yeah.
won't determine what the ultimate cost of the project will be
Right,
yet.
but I'm saying if the engineering work comes back and it's $800,000, not that it would be, but the neighborhood might go, not a chance. We're not.
Or
doing
the town might say,
it." Town might say not a chance.
But agreed. But so are you saying that we do this all without petitions or any subscription deposit kind of thing?
I'm saying, let's get the number.
Yeah, and I think,
then we-
yeah, there'd be no cost to the town at this
It doesn't
point.
cost the town
Yeah.
at all. It's just basically get the number for the project, and then let's decide how much the town will contribute.
Right, but so to tell the engineers how much to ask them how much it's going to cost to do to design the project,
Mhm.
we have to know the boundary of the project.
Right, but we do. In this case, we have a pretty good idea what is being.
You have a pretty good idea. There's PG&E will eventually weigh in and say, oh, no, this house has to be in or that house can't be in. But I'd say we're, 90% comfortable with probably where the district boundaries will be.
Are you buying that, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, if we don't need a petition to go forward.
No, because we're not spending any money. I mean, I understand, it's actually making, that it makes some sense, it's starting to make some sense. We can get a proposal for the full cost of producing the engineer's report. That costs us nothing except time. But as Councilmember or Vice Mayor Wellner said, that will not, none of this touches the actual cost of the project. Just to be clear, we're only talking about the cost of design to get an engineer's report. So it makes some sense to have that real number. And let's just say it's 250,000.
And then the council decides what
Council
to do
looks at
instead
it,
of writing a blank check
Folks
ahead
are
of
in the
time.
room and council says, you know what, we want you to pay for half, and they make a decision. And then the petitions would be still be based on a total estimated project cost that we'd have to figure out how to get. But it would also specifically say, we're requiring X amount of subscription deposits and the town will provide the remainder to fund this proposal we have in front of us now.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
no one ever knows how much the project will cost until the design is done.
Well, you don't know what it costs until it's
Okay.
done.
Until the
but
project is
I'm just saying, this is in place of the preliminary report.
Yep.
We're getting a real report and we're figuring out how to pay for it with real numbers.
Right.
And
Okay,
on top of it,
John, would you like to make the motion?
subscription deposits would be.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would like to make a motion to do what I said.
So lift the moratorium and direct staff to go solicit bids for engineering.
Yes, that's well said.
Yeah,
Sign.
there you go.
Or engineering, yeah.
Okay, so we
And then
have a
come back to
motion
us
on the
with that
floor. Do we have a second?
But do we need to amend the motion to include the new process that this subcommittee suggested?
I think this is the process.
This is.
Yeah, no, because we're eventually gonna bring it back an actual policy for you to approve at some point. So I don't
Great.
think you need to do that.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so
Okay.
there's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I
Alice seconded.
seconded it.
Great, let's take the vote. Lee, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Yes.
Councilmember Nickvar.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wellner.
Yes.
And Mayor Thier.
Yes. Okay,
Wasn't sure how you.
so now we are moving on to public hearing 3, town personnel hourly rate fee schedule. I believe we have a very brief staff report.
Yes. Mayor and council members, staff are periodically assigned to projects in which the town can recover costs associated with the staff time expended on the project. These rates are established by resolution by the council. We don't do projects like this a lot, but when we do them, it's important to have a resolution that's up to date. And the resolution that is currently on the books was last updated in 2015, and doesn't include a majority of current staff positions. So we've brought back a resolution updated for 2025, and it's attached to your staff report.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for staff? I'm not seeing any. I'd like to take public comment. Is there any public comment in the room?
Nope, seeing none.
Is there any online?
Seeing none.
Okay, so I guess I'll move that we approve the town personnel hourly rate fee schedule. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Lee, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fredericks.
Yes.
Councilmember Nick Farr.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wellner.
Yes.
Mayor Thier.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. We are actually going to adjourn into closed session right now.
Let's take public comment to make sure there's no one who wants to make any comments on the
Thank
public.
you, Ben. Is there any public comment on closed session?
Seeing none.
Any online?
Seeing none.
Great. We will now adjourn into closed session. Okay. Are we waiting for Councilmember Fredericks? Are we waiting for Councilmember Fredericks?
I have no idea.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so I would like to report out that we held a closed session and there's nothing to report. And I would like to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
So we are adjourned. Thank you.